Trying a game from a genre you've never played before can make it kind of hard to know what you think about the game. If you don't like this game, does it mean you don't like the genre? Would this be considered a good game by those who enjoy the genre, or is it not a favorite of those who really like that type of game? Are the things I don't like about the game features that people consider integral to that genre? These are the questions I've been asking as I've been playing Vault of the Void. Vault of the Void is a roguelike deck builder, a genre that I've never played before. It is developed by Spider Nest Games. It was released in 2022 for PC, and you can find it for $17.99 on Steam. It doesn't have an official rating from the ESRB, but I would say it's somewhere between an E10 to teen rating. The biggest issue is that the card art can have creepy monsters and some depictions of violence. So personally, I'd probably lean it more towards an E10, but that's just my opinion, not an official rating. Vault of the Void doesn't have any story, so we need to just jump right into the gameplay. The general goal of the game is to reach the Void and defeat it. You start off this journey by playing the tutorial, but after you defeat that, you'll start by selecting a difficulty, which normal is the only one unlocked at the beginning, other than you can replay the introduction. You will then choose your character. There are 4 characters, but you are limited to 1 as you start the game, with more unlocking as you successfully complete a run with the different characters. Characters are all unique. They each have 2 options for a starting deck and have mechanics that are specific to each character. The first character you're able to play as is called the Hidden and is more of a rogue type class. His major mechanic is called Combo. This will allow cards that have the Swift ability to play extra times depending on how much combo you have. The Rogue also has cards that cause bleed on enemies. This is a status that will remove health equal to the amount of bleed after the enemy takes their turn. There are also cards with the Clot ability that will remove bleed from an enemy, but then will activate some other ability in return. Each character that you can pick has a similar setup. They all have a major mechanic, 2 possible starting decks, a starting spell, and then other abilities that help complement that mechanic. I don't know that going into detail about every character would be helpful here, but to kind of give a general overview, the other characters are the Tempest, which is kind of like a paladin type character that can use lightning. The Enlightened, who is a monk type character that uses like time warping attacks and spirit energy to defeat enemies. And then finally, the Daughter of the Void, who I didn't feel fit easily into a type, but if I had to classify her, it would be kind of like a dark mage type character who uses corruption to defeat enemies. Once you've picked your character, you have to pick the starting deck that you want. Each of these starting decks focuses on a different aspect of the character's skills. For example, the Hidden has decks called Blade and Bleed. Both of these decks use the Hidden's combo ability, but in different ways. The Blade deck focuses on direct damage, while the Bleed deck instead unsurprisingly focuses on the bleed mechanic. Once you've picked your character and your starting deck, you then get into the game. You start by getting a booster pack of cards that you can add to your deck. These are cards that you can swap into your deck in place of some of your starting cards. You have to have 20 cards in your deck, but you have full control over swapping out any cards that you earn over the course of your run. After getting that booster pack of cards, you'll start on the first floor of your adventure. Floors 1 and 2 are set up in a very similar way. You have a hexagonal map with various icons that mean different things. You then select where you are going, and any of the other options that you might have had to be able to go are eliminated from the map, unless it causes you to be trapped. There's always going to be a way for you to move closer to the boss of that floor. The icons tend to mean 3 general things. The first of these, and the most common, are enemy battles. These are represented by little soul heads. All of these battles will give you a card at the end of it. You can see what cards are available by hovering over the hex that enemy is on. This is useful for if you're wanting to plan your route to get certain cards, you can do so. There can also be extra bonuses by fighting certain enemies. Enemies with a potion beside them will give you a potion after completion. They have a green up arrow that will allow you to upgrade a card afterwards. An enemy with a booster pack beside it will give you a random set of cards, and a different looking enemy icon that is green instead of purple and has a chest will give you a random artifact at the start of the battle, but be warned, the enemies here will be more difficult to defeat. There is also the boss encounter that is the last hex of the map, and beating them will give you some random rewards to choose from. The second type of spot on the map are shops. As you battle monsters, you'll get 2 types of currency, essence and souls. You can spend these at shops that you run into to buy all kinds of things like cards, artifacts, void stones, and potions. The third type of encounter are events. These can be finding a treasure chest, finding a shrine that gives you a choice of benefits, or an event where you find an artifact or a chance for a special card to be added often at a cost. These are definitely the rarest of the bunch, but you'll run into a handful of these each run. After the first 2 floors, you'll be faced with a final room with 4 statues and the Void. You have to battle 2 of the statues before taking on the Void. Each of these battles before the Void will give you an artifact that is useful in the Void battle. You also get to use whatever remaining souls you have to do damage to the Void before taking it on. These battles are all pretty difficult and is basically you fighting 3 boss level characters in a row. We have one major area of the game left to talk about, and that is combat. This is where you'll be spending the majority of your time in the game. As you enter each battle, you will start out facing 1 to 3 enemies. The goal is to defeat the enemies while avoiding damage that they're trying to do to you. The player will start each battle. You draw a hand of cards and get so much energy to start each round. Each card will have an energy cost associated with it. In order to gain more energy to play cards in a round, you can purge cards by right-clicking on them. This will discard the card, but give you 1 energy per card purged. You're also able to carry energy over between rounds, as well as cards. You don't have to discard all of your cards at the end of turn, although there will be certain cards that will be discarded automatically because of certain abilities. In general, there are 4 types of cards. First are attack cards that are going to be your main damage dealers. Second are block cards that you use to defend against the threat that the enemy sends against you. Third are ability cards. Technically, most of the block cards are also ability cards, but there are also ability cards that will do other things like increase your combo, allow you to expel cards from your deck, add bleed to an enemy, things like that. The last type of cards are buff cards, which will give you some sort of passive ability for the rest of the battle, but this card usually gets expelled from the deck for the rest of that battle. So after you play your cards, the enemies will then take their turn. While you're taking your turn, you can see what the enemy is going to do when it's their turn. Enemies can do damage to you, give you status effects, give you affliction cards that can mess your deck up, increase their attack damage, heal, or things like this. Enemies do not damage you immediately though. What they do is give you threat that you then have to block before the end of your next turn. Whatever threat you fail to defend against will be taken out of your health, and this damage will continue on after the battle. So you'll want to keep track of your health as you go from battle to battle. There are ways to regain health though, and if you beat the boss at the end of a floor, your health will be restored to the maximum. Now you can tell how close you are to being done with a battle by the orb next to your health. As you defeat monsters, the percentage in that orb will increase. Once you reach 100%, there will be no more reinforcements. All you have to do at that point is clean up the last few enemies and you will be victorious. Typically though, if you start out with only 1 monster, that will be the only monster you have to face for the duration of the battle. So you don't have to worry about reinforcements typically in those cases. After battle, you'll gain the card from that hex, any essence or souls from defeating the enemy, and whatever bonus may have been on that hex. If that was a card upgrade, you'll be taken to a screen showing the cards of your deck and bag that haven't already been upgraded yet. The upgrades make your card stronger by increasing the value of damage, block, or the status effects the card does. It can reduce the cost of a triggered ability or add some new ability to the card in general. Sometimes this is a combination of things, and there are times where the energy cost of the card will change as well and either go higher or lower. In addition to your cards, you also have a few other things that will help you out against the monsters you face. The first thing I'll mention are spells. Each character starts with a spell at the beginning of the game, but you get more by beating bosses and can even find a shop that sells other spells on the map sometimes. Spells are an ability you can use during your turn and will then require a number of rounds to pass as a cooldown before it can be used again. Artifacts are items that you can collect that also give your character a boost. Like spells, every character will start out with one that works together with their class and playstyle. Most artifacts give the character a passive boost, but there are a few that require you to activate them. Most artifacts are specific to a character class, but there are some that are more general that can be used by any. Potions are one-use items that can be used 2 ways in Vault of the Void. You can either use them during battle or brew them at the start of the battle. How you choose to use the potion will change exactly how the potion works. Brewing a potion typically gives you a small benefit over time, while a potion will do more at the time that you use it. If you have enough potions, you can choose to have one in the brew slot and one in your pouch to use during the battle, getting the benefit of both potions, or at least the potential benefit. You wouldn't have to use the one that you put in your pouch, but it'd be there if you needed it. Last, we have void stones that can be added to your cards to give an extra boost. A blue one will allow you to draw and discard a card. Red void stones give you rage, which increases your damage for that turn, and so on. These can give a strategic boost to certain cards and can really help either make cards really powerful or useful in chaining together with other cards in your deck. You also earn these by doing damage over time. Like, so as you do damage to enemies in battles, there's a bar at the top of your screen that will fill up, and then after one gets filled up, it will give you the void stone of that color that is on the bar. Using all of these mechanics, you will fight your way through the 3 floors until one of 2 things happens. You defeat the void, which is the final boss of every run, or you die on the way. If you are able to beat the void, you can master a card for the class that you beat the void with. Each class has 10 cards that are able to be mastered. Mastering a card allows you to add it to your cards at the beginning of a run. You aren't able to pick the same card in 2 consecutive runs, but we'll have to pick another one if you have another one that's mastered, or you'll get a health potion option if you don't want to take any along. Regardless of how your run ends, you will also get void points, although you do get more for beating the void than by dying on the way. You can use these to unlock cosmetics like card backs, environments for your battles, alternate card artwork, and oddly enough, new challenges. Challenges are runs that have unique conditions. An early example of this is to beat a run using only common cards and nothing higher than that. And this is kind of a lot of information about the gameplay. And to be honest, I feel like there are things that I haven't really touched on as much as you could. I'm not sure if this is a common element of roguelike deck builders, but there is a lot to learn in this game. Even so, I never felt overwhelmed by this, but at the same time, I wasn't really sure if I was able to fully utilize the systems that were there in an optimal way. So with being my first roguelike deck builder, what did I think about Vault of the Void's gameplay? My thoughts on the gameplay are a bit mixed. When I got into a run, the game definitely sucked me in and made me want to keep exploring the floors, finding new artifacts and cards, and getting into battles. I also enjoy the class system and how each of the characters you play has a unique feel to them with their own mechanics, cards, spells, and artifacts. That said, there were cons to some of the things that I liked, but also some aspects that just didn't really click with me in general. None of these are particularly major, but they were things that I didn't always enjoy about the game. The first is that the class system, while I did enjoy the unique feel of each class, led the game to be a weird mix of repetition and randomness. Classes always start with the same two possible decks. The result of this is that you will be trying to build a deck around whatever mechanic you pick at the beginning. The problem here is that some runs are better than others at giving you cards that really fit with the mechanics of that deck. This meant that the starts of the run would always feel very similar to previous ones because you'd be using, one of the two decks that you're typically using for that class. But the randomness of the cards you were able to get could really hurt your run if you didn't get ones that meshed well with the strategy that you chose. The second struggle I had with this game is that there can be some massive difficulty spikes. There were a number of runs that I was going through pretty smoothly and then ran into an encounter that wrecked me. It either killed me outright or did so much damage to me that it was a struggle to get to the end of that floor. Whether it was abilities that really messed you up or just a severe increase in damage done, these encounters were kind of frustrating. The last struggle was the game's sense of progression. I know that not all roguelikes require some kind of upgrade system. The weird thing here is that Vault of the Void kind of tries to have one, but it isn't great. The mastery system only works if you win, which may help at higher difficulties, but isn't going to help you really early on. Not to mention, I don't really feel like the mastery system was that helpful. You only get one card per run, and while that will help some, it isn't that much. There's also the void point system. I do like this better, as I did like the cosmetic options that you can unlock, but I didn't really understand why the challenges were locked behind void coins. It would have made more sense to have the previous challenge unlock the next one. This way just feels like a way to require more grinding in your game. All of this led Vault of the Void to be a game that I enjoyed playing once I got into, but not necessarily be a game that I was always excited about starting up. It can be rather difficult at times and even a bit on the repetitive side. I didn't dislike Vault of the Void, but I did struggle to want to play it at times. Something I did really like about the game was the art style. It has a dark fantasy look about it, and I really enjoyed it. There is a decent variety of enemy types, although you will see them repeated fairly often because you'll be playing through runs multiple times. There is even alternative art for some of the cards that is downright amazing, although there were also others that didn't really seem to fit the tone of the game very well and were maybe a bit too cartoony. This isn't that big of a deal though, because you can choose from different art, and having different options will appeal to different people, so it kind of makes it work really well. I do wish there were more options for alternative art for more types of cards though. On the sound side of things, I found Vault of the Void fitting for the kind of game it was. It has some pretty decent sound effects for various actions. The music is also very fitting for the game. It's a good atmospheric kind of music to have in the background while planning out your strategies for the battle. It has a nice fanfare when you're victorious. It's music that kind of fits in that way. It isn't music that I'd probably search out to listen to outside of the game, but in the game it works really well with what's going on. In terms of performance, I had no issues at all while playing Vault of the Void. No bugs, no crashes. It was a smooth experience. There's really nothing more to see here. Vault of the Void leaves me with such mixed feelings. On the one hand, it is a fun game with a lot of very interesting mechanics. The way that it makes each class feel unique is really cool, and I liked each of the unique mechanics the classes had to offer. It's easy to get into the flow of the game and want to keep playing until you get to a boss or finish a whole run. Add to that a nice art style and the ability to unlock more cosmetics, and there is fun to be had here. On the other hand, the game can be kind of difficult and punishing. While there are a lot of cool mechanics, it may be a lot for those not familiar with the genre. Not that a lot lot of them were hard to understand for me, but when difficulty spikes came about, it made me feel like I maybe didn't understand how to use the mechanics optimally. The game's progression systems are also a little weak. While I do like unlocking cosmetics, unlocking more challenges with the Void coins and the mastery system didn't excite me quite as much. This led Vault of the Void to be a game I got into while playing it, but had a hard time wanting to play when I sat down to play something. Perhaps the best representation of this is that I started playing Vault of the Void at the end of December, and am now just putting out a review in May. It was just never a game that I was able to get too excited about playing. These mixed feelings about the game lead me to rate Vault of the Void a 7 out of 10. It's quite possible that if you're a big fan of roguelike deck builders, that you will enjoy Vault of the Void more than I did. This game is really the only experience I've had with the genre, and the difficulty I experienced may just be due to my lack of knowledge about these type of games. Vault of the Void is one of those games that I will probably come back to and play a run of every once in a while. While this game isn't my favorite, it does kind of pique my curiosity about the roguelike deck builder genre in general. It certainly seems like a genre that I would like, as I've always been a fan of roguelikes and games that utilize cards. But my experience with Vault of the Void just didn't really click like I thought it might. That said, if what you see here looks appealing to you, I definitely don't consider Vault of the Void a bad game. If you're looking for a new roguelike deck builder to play and know you really enjoy the genre, then it's possible you'll find a lot to enjoy about Vault of the Void. It just didn't wind up being a game I enjoyed as much as I thought I might.